to this Smoking Hot Tuesday webinar. Here we are again talking about the high-path avian influenza situation for small flock stakeholders in Ontario. I'm Ashley Honsberger. I'm the Executive Director for Poultry Industry Council. And I'm pleased to be co-hosting with OMAFRA, who provided a grant through the Canadian Egg Partnership to make this webinar series possible. And as we mentioned last week, this is the last official Tuesday update, but we're certainly here continuing on doing the work in the background, but we're also a resource if you have questions moving forward. So we're all here to continue to support your knowledge needs. So once again, I just wanted to say thanks. We've been tracking not individual information, but just to see how often people are tuning in, where we're tuning in from. We've had really good coverage across Canada. We've had folks tuning in from the US. But certainly for our Ontario stakeholders, we've had a really strong contingent of people tuning in. So you can see we've done 12 webinars in total, about 750 people logged in live on a Tuesday night to hear what we had to say. After the fact, we had quite a good following of people checking out the YouTube channel and the biosecurity resource page, where we've been stockpiling all of the links and maps and all that kind of stuff, has been really active on our website. So for us as a small organization, we're feeling a really strong response to the information that's being shared, and that shows a huge amount of responsibility on the part of small flock stakeholders. So thanks very much for being a part of it. But unfortunately, it's not quite over yet. So the conversation tonight is, where do we go from here? So as much as we haven't seen a new infected premise pop up in the last 10 days or so, there's still all that background stuff going on around cleaning and disinfecting, getting the sites ready so that we can kind of eliminate those zones and all sorts of things happening. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So once again, the Poultry Industry Council website, we've got that biosecurity and disease page. And if anything new comes up, we're certainly going to be adding to that page. But the best thing to do is to sign up for the small flock stakeholder e-blast list. We're just sending out information regarding anything interesting to small flock keepers, including if we have another webinar coming up over the summer. So joining us tonight, we have a couple folks from the CFIA. So we've got Victoria Wilson, as well as Meaghan Theophilopoulos. OMAFRA, we've got Al Dam. Dr. Lucy took a break, which is great. So she's on vacation. But we do have Dr. Erin Priest kind of filling in that veterinarian role for us tonight. And she's going to do a really great presentation on some lessons learned, some best practices, what she's been seeing in the field. Dr. Brian Stevens is here to answer all of our wild bird stuff. Dr. Emily Martin's here again. She's going to answer any of the technical things that are in her purview. And of course, from the PIC team, we've actually got myself and Charlotte, and then Trina Fitzgerald as well. I also just wanted to take a moment. We've been giving a nod to the mental health resources that are available for the agriculture community. But we also know that there's a lot of pressure going on in the veterinary world, particularly from a mental health standpoint. So if you know a vet, give them a hug. If you're in contact with your vet, maybe send them a text just to say that you appreciate them. They are really the underpinning of the health and welfare of poultry in Ontario, and they're a really important asset to us. So we really have to make sure that we let them know that we appreciate them. So with that, I'll invite Victoria to come on screen here and tell us some stuff.
All right, thank you, Ashley. Welcome back, everyone. Since we last got together last Tuesday, there have been no new additions to the list of infected premises on our website. Response actions are continuing at different levels at all the affected premises, and maps are being updated with additional or removal of information. So continue to watch that map on the CFIA website. The primary control zone accounts for the movement of poultry in, out, and through the area. Commercial poultry can be placed in an infected zone only with prior approval. In the last few weeks, a number of infected zones within the primary control zone are no longer marked. This is because in each of these infected premises or IPs, disposal has been completed, either as cleaning and disinfection completed for very small premises or by capping the compost piles with required dead bird surveillance, release testing for commercial flocks. And now that everyone in that zone, apart from the infected premise itself, will only need to meet the restricted zone requirements and conditions for any movements. Again, please contact the movement control group for any questions you do have, or use the interactive tool on our website for the specifics of what can and cannot happen. There's usually a lot of conversation that includes the terms commercial and non-commercial poultry. So how do we differentiate between the two? So commercial poultry can be defined as chicken and turkey raised under Canada's supply management quota system for producing or selling their products or breeding for these purposes. Or birds raised outside of the quota system on a premise with 300 or more for producing or selling their products or breeding for these purposes. A non-commercial poultry can be defined as birds raised in smaller flocks or fewer than 300 for producing or selling their products locally for limited sales or for breeding for these purposes. Any considerations of the placement of commercial birds within the infected zone would be done through our movement and permitting group, which is in a position better direct you on the conditions that would need to be met, as no two situations are exactly alike. It's always preferable that movement requests are submitted at least 5 days in advance, through the regular communication channels to ensure that we can issue permits, provided everyone's in compliance. The birds that are placed will be under the restriction of that zone that they are placed in. This includes the issuance of permissions for the movement out of, within, and into the transit of live birds originating from non-commercial farms, so small flocks less than 300 of any age is prohibited. This excludes the movement of birds to slaughter under the conditions of a specific permit. Avian influenza continues to be a global issue. Wild birds, especially waterfowl, are natural reservoirs for influenza viruses. They're not normally affected by this disease, but can still transmit it to a domestic bird. The disease can spread to birds through contact with infected poultry products as well. And it can also spread through contaminated manure, litter, clothing, footwear, vehicles, equipment, feed, and water. So anyone with farm animals must practice good biosecurity habits that include maintaining high sanitation standards, keeping your poultry away from areas frequented by wild birds, maintaining strict control over access to poultry houses, and making sure that equipment is cleaned and disinfected before taking it into those poultry houses. As well, you want to ensure that you do not keep bird feeders or create duck ponds close to poultry barns because they attract wild birds and encourage the congregation of birds. I will draw attention to a handy presentation that was added to the PIC website on the placement of poultry. Make sure you do take a look at this, and if you have any questions, the best place to get your information on what can and cannot happen is to contact the CFIA movement and permitting group. As a brief summary though, for the movement of day-old poultry, hatchery to any farm, after capping of compost piles at an infected premise, they're capped, it is allowed with an appropriate permit. However, receiving non-commercial poultry farms must house poultry indoors. Some conditions that would be summarized would be keeping track of your birds, having to keep birds away from wild birds, not having birds come in contact with other birds when in transit, going directly back to your farm when picking the birds up, as well as keeping wild birds away from your birds. So in short, no cross contact. Again, if there's any specific questions in relation to the movement of live birds or poultry products, I encourage you to reach out to the movement control group, as they are the experts and they will have the answers for you. All I can kind of give you right now is just the high level condition and requirements based on your specific situation. One thing I did want to touch on tonight was the release of zones and how it will look. So to begin, I'll give you a definition of the primary decontamination, as this is our milestone to use to begin our post-outbreak surveillance and get those zones released. So primary decontamination is defined as initial virus elimination activities on the infected premise following destruction and disposal activities to mitigate pathogen transmission from the site. So activities will include, but are not limited to, complete dry cleaning of bird housing areas, enclosures. This includes your barns, outdoor pens, coops, etc., including cages, nest boxes, floors, slighted floors, walls, manure pits, and barns, just all that good stuff. And then complete dry cleaning of egg collection, grading and storage room, anterooms, and other transition areas of the barn. Removing accumulation of litter, manure in outdoor pens, ranges, and areas birds congregate, and the accumulation of manure and feathers from premises, laneways, and roadways, as well as cleaning and disinfecting items that are or were heavily contaminated and could pose a risk for transmission of the pathogen off-site, such as skid steers, tractors, other potential fomites used in depopulation and disposal activities. So you guys might be wondering more about the non-commercial poultry premises, where there's an inability to complete like a full dry cleaning of the identified areas. So primary decontamination at these sites can be complete when the manure, litter, contaminated feed, feathers, and carcasses, and animal products such as eggs have been removed from the barns, flock housing areas, enclosures, and are disposed of, as well as having laneways, roadways, all of that, all free of manure and feathers. And then the equipment used for these activities has to be cleaned and disinfected. So once this step is complete, the primary decontamination, we can begin the clock on our post-outbreak surveillance, which would be 28 days of surveillance. And if all goes well, the primary control zone would be removed. So we'd be looking at flock health questionnaires, dead bird surveillance, and investigations on sick bird calls. For the small flock group, though, we look more at the sick bird calls, as flock health questionnaires and dead bird surveillance is more for the commercial side of things. So if the criteria is met in the 28-day surveillance period, the zone is lifted, which means restrictions will have to be lifted for that specific zone. The infected premise would still be under restrictions until full cleaning and disinfection is completed, and a 14-day vacancy period has been applied following approval of cleaning and disinfection. So that's kind of a brief overview on how we start to release the zones. So hopefully that's starting to happen very shortly. And as always, CFIA is continuing the response to sick bird calls and high mortality calls. When they do come in, our sampling teams follow up immediately. CFIA website is up to date with pertinent information regularly. So if you have any questions surrounding the movement of live birds, please don't hesitate to reach out to the number or email on our website to get answers on all your queries on permits. Thank you for your time and your patience as we navigate through this difficult situation.
Thank you, Victoria. So next up, we're going to hear from your colleague, Meaghan, and I think Al's also going to pipe in as well with some of the cleaning and disinfecting information.
Hello, everyone. There's Meaghan. Yeah, I asked Meaghan for the last minute this morning to see if she might be able to join us today. Meaghan is one of the C&D leads at CFIA, so C&D stands for Cleaning and Disinfecting. She's trying to help folks through the heavy lifting of getting a zone released, which means after the farm's been quarantined and the birds have been destroyed and the initial heat treatment of manure and birds is done, then it's cleaning and getting that zone released. And I asked Meaghan to come and talk to us a little bit tonight about some of the challenges that she has seen with our small flock stakeholders and some of the things to think about. Now, for almost everyone on this call, I'm hoping you're not in an infected premise, but I thought it was so important to get Meaghan to talk about that it's not just a simple, oh, birds are dead and we move on. There's a requirement, and that requirement actually is not just something that Meaghan is making up. Like, it's this is done because of trade issues, right? But then I'll flip it over to you, Meaghan, and you can just kind of wax on eloquently, and I'll just kind of hang in the background.
And often you think of situations that you've been in that you can speak to about different coop, different small flock styles. There's so many different, right? You could be 5 birds, you could be 100 or plus birds, or different species of ducks and other things. So the challenges that we are seeing, so Victoria was right. She mentioned primary decontamination is like the first step that we really want to get. So that's the gross removal of organic material, manure, and those types of things. So everybody's used to when you clean out a barn or you clean out a coop and you remove your bedding, you remove your manure, but we've got to take it to a level that is, sometimes people refer to it as like you're going to eat off the kitchen floor. Sounds a little crazy, but we got to strive for up here to hope we meet something. So coop styles, barn styles, that contributes a lot to the challenges that we see in cleaning. If it's an old bank barn or it's a shared space, we have to consider were those birds free ranging in that space. They are not a hazard to the other animals or their manure and litter, but it was when we repopulate, we have to consider where did those birds go to in those shared spaces, and we have to ensure we clean those spaces, not just where the birds sat. We can remove a lot of litter and things, but nesting boxes, roosting, roosting bars and things like that can have layers and layers of manure and other debris on them, and those pose a lot of challenges to clean. So we just have to think about all those things and think about the styles. Some owners clean often, clean a lot, and so their job at the end of the day is less. So there's value in having good practices every day. There's value in thinking about the design of your buildings and cleanability of your spaces. Some things at the end of the day in the cleaning and disinfection part are easier to throw out or burn than it is than the time and effort is there to clean them. Everybody has a different style of what they want to do, so we try to work with that, identify the challenges, and come up with solutions or compromises to help them achieve what we need to and what they're happy with for their premise. So it's a little bit about it. The primary decontamination is a little bit new. It's not something that in previous years we had as a step to reach. That allows us, in the event somebody doesn't want to finish a full cleaning and disinfecting. So normally you would do a dry clean to remove organic matter, then you would do a wet clean, and then you would do a disinfection. That's what I call the traditional clean. If you reach primary contamination and you wanted to choose to fallow, that is an option. You would just have to reach that level, and then it's 120 days. So you would still be considered an infected premise, but the PCZ around you would be released eventually. So there is some options, there is some flexibilities. Everybody has a different situation of their abilities in life and what they can accomplish. So that's why we're there to try to work through it with them.
Yeah. And I think with some of the folks you've been working with, Meaghan, like some of them are gung-ho about getting it cleaned and disinfected, whether that's commercial or backyard flock, because they want that zone released, right? And in some, they're looking at things like demolition, and they're looking at things like fallow periods. So can you explain what fallow means?
Yep, fallow means essentially we get after we've reached primary decontamination. So we have to reach that before we would allow fallow to happen. So fallow is essentially that once you've reached primary, you walk away from it and you let it sit. We don't use the space, we don't disrupt the space, it sits. So 120 days is what it takes, 4 months for fallow to be reached.
Yeah.
It's not something, Ontario hasn't had a lot of AI in the past, so it's not something that's been widely used, if at all, let alone backyard flocks, but it is an option. And depending on someone's situation, it might be viable. They might just want to walk away from backyard flocks and not put that work in, or maybe they're not able to put that work in. So primary decon allows for fallow to be something that could be a viable option.
Yeah, but I think that depending upon the situation, every situation will be different. You or some from CFI, C&D team will be working with them.
Yep.
At the end of the day, though, that fallow period means that primary control zone is up for those 120 days until you reach the 4 months, right?
Yep. So no restocking, no repopulating, nothing in that infected premise. Correct.
Yeah, but that also means though that zone is up, so everyone in that 10K zone also has to deal with the permitting issues. Is that correct?
We can talk about that a little bit more.
Okay.
Primary decontamination, as I said, is new and it has changed a little bit of the game for the better, but it is very confusing to understand. Once primary decontamination is reached, it will allow for the 20 days post-outbreak surveillance to begin. And once that is reached, then some of the zoning is removed, but the infected zone still will remain. So the little red dot in the middle still stays until it is
okay. So that actually gives a lot more options for the folks that live in that control zone in the 10K.
Yeah.
In there.
And primary decontamination, allowing it to happen sooner, allows for post-outbreak surveillance to happen sooner, so that zones can be released sooner. So while it's not always a benefit to the producer, it's a benefit to everybody around them.
Excellent. One of the questions we get a lot is, I have an outdoor coop. How do I disinfect dirt?
Okay. So you buy a whole bunch of hand scrapers. I feel like now I travel with them and I'm like, I've brought you a present. Here it is. You know, let's say we're there on destruction day. I've tried to go when I can. And in having the conversation early to have them understand at least that, let's say we used a tractor, one of their own tractors to transport material, then we want to make sure we get that tractor or any utensils clean fast, because I'm going to assume that they need that tractor for other things on their farm or, you know, property. So that's a right away thing that we want to happen. And then there is a bit of time, right, to make a plan. Officially, CFIA does like to have an SOP. Sometimes with backyard flocks that comes in more of a verbal SOP, just because it's not commercial. So things are, you know, we work with the producer to get things as close to our normal CFIA processes as possible, but we are a little flexible and creative in how we get that done. So in SOP, we talk about your plan. So are we going to dry clean? Are we going to wet clean? And are we going to disinfect? We talk about challenges that we can identify. I'll identify challenges I see in the barn or coop, and then they can get going. So dry cleaning is removal, scraping. It is, you know, roll up your elbow, you know, roll up your sleeves and get dirty. It's just, you need to put a lot of the time in. That's really when it needs to be done. So once you remove those things, that allows for wet cleaning to be that much more effective. So you don't have to use detergent when you wet clean. Water is fine. Hot water is better. We ask you to be mindful of pressure washing and aerosols, because that's a concern for spread to neighboring areas. So using some type of water and a detergent is ideal, and scrubbing, depending what you have in a coop. If you have different conduits and piping, there's more surfaces to cover and more things to get at. Some of the coops are very simple. Sometimes there's chicken wire and straw gets stuck between chicken wire and a wall. And, you know, there's just an unbelievable amount of scenarios. And you guys will all know what your own coop looks like and those challenges. We've seen nice new ones that are plastic walls. We've seen ones that are shared spaces with a workshop, or in the winter, they've run through an entire building because it's winter and they've given more space to them. That then creates a challenge for you if you have AI, because now you have a bigger space to clean.
Yeah.
So when things are working well, like everything in life, it's great. And they're, you know, but it's when there's a challenge like AI, then you reconsider what things you want to do, because now you might want to minimize the spaces you have to clean. So you dry clean, then we can wet. We come at certain spots. We officially do 4 site visits to premise. So site visit number 1 is in the beginning to talk to you, to understand what your challenges are and what your site looks like. Site visit number 2 is a dry clean or primary decontamination inspection. Site visit 3 is a wet clean. So after you wash. The importance of that one is we want to ensure that you've met a certain level of clean before you apply a disinfectant. Disinfectant doesn't work well through organic material. So we don't want anyone wasting their time and having us to deliver an unfavorable reply on what we see. So those are the 4 site visits. A disinfectant, lime is fantastic. It's a really great economical option. Lime also is helpful when you have dirt floors, or you have ground outside where birds have free ranged and accumulated in a certain area. So we encourage you to scrape those areas. If it's wood or something, let's say on a fence line, maybe you can take that piece of wood off and just dispose of it. But lime is another option for spreading out on dirt areas. Spraying soil with disinfectant isn't effective. I know we sometimes think it's magic, but it's not. So lime for outdoor areas and grass, and then a disinfectant inside. Disinfectant just needs to be something that is virucidal. Bleach is an option. You just have to ensure that it's, you know, at an appropriate concentration, and ultimately that you follow the instructions on whatever product you choose. So they all will have a concentration that you need to meet. So you will dilute it to whatever the label says, and then apply it for the appropriate application time. So often it's 5 to 10 minutes that it has to sit there. Most often you don't have to rinse it off, and things aren't harmful to be left there for the future. It's fine just to spray it and kind of walk away. So in a nutshell, that's some of it. If you have a specific question, Dan, or want to steer me in another direction, I can answer.
Sure. No, I think we've covered it off. Essentially, you're wanting to see a coop that's like it was brand new, right, before a bird ever went in.
We want to like strive for that, so we get here, and when we go, if there's small areas we identify and we can clean right then and there, We do. Sometimes when you put that much physical labor in, you feel like you're done. And then when you walk away and you come back to it, you see something else. So often when we're with the owners, they'll be like, I see it now. Yep, easy fix, I got it. And that's encouraging because I don't want to ever underestimate the amount of work they put in. And when I'm there and I make a comment, sometimes it comes across in a way that I don't appreciate that. I see it, but I want at the end of the day for it to meet the CFIA C&D standards. And I want that space to be safe for that when you repopulate, that we don't have to go through this again. That's the ultimate goal. So when you look at it like that, the producers or the homeowners, they understand and appreciate that. And so far we've had really great experiences with the small backyard owners. And yeah, it's been great. And I'm glad, you know, as me and the rest of the C&D team and as CFIA, we're really glad to hear that.
Well, I hope you never have to go on another small flock again. So,
well fingers crossed, right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Meaghan. That was great. It gives everyone a bit of a flavor of what is expected after the horrible event of depopulation has happened, because that's really like you're not done at that point. And that's unfortunately the thing that people have to think about is impacting, you know, their neighbors and how we move ahead out of this, right? And the fact that they've got options is great, and the fact that CFI is there to support is fantastic, and we thank you very much for that.
No problem. Nice working with you guys.
Thanks very much, Meaghan. You're working from the field and you took time out to work from your car to deliver the message, and we really, really appreciate that. Now we're going to have Dr. Brian Stevens come on and give us a bit of a wild bird update.
Thanks, Ashley. So not much of an update today, which is probably good news overall. We've definitely seen a decline in cases over the past few weeks. We are still seeing the occasional bird and wild mammal, mostly red foxes, that are coming up positive. But we have definitely seen a decline in the number of cases over the past few weeks. That's not unexpected. This virus in general does not like the heat. It's not going to transmit as easily during the summer months. So we expect to see the cases start to drop over the summer. We still expect that we're going to have sporadic cases throughout the summer. And it's something just to remain vigilant, even if cases are dropping across the province. And also be aware that once we get into fall migration and we start to get some of that cool weather, we're definitely going to, or we're likely going to see an increase in it, similar to what Europe saw last year. So something we're keeping an eye on. We'll continue to test birds at the CWHC, and definitely let us know if you do find any dead birds that you're concerned about, because we will still be bringing in raptors and waterfowl and corvids to test for AIV throughout the summer, as well as other birds like songbirds. And I'll just, before I end, I'll just mention there was a question that came up about recording differences of birds throughout the year. Just if there is changes that you've noticed this year versus previous years of herons or ducks or geese or raptors on your property. It's not something that we necessarily need to know about as we go along, but definitely if you do notice any dead waterfowl or other birds on your property, please let us know about it. And if you notice any sick ones, then reaching out to your local animal services or wildlife rehabilitation center would be the best advice that I can give for that. And that's all I have for tonight.
We enjoy your good news, so thank you very much. And now we'll have Dr. Erin Priest come up and give her presentation.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me again. I was on the first one and I'm on the last one for now anyways, so I'm just gonna show. All right, good. Great, thanks Ashley. So I'm Dr. Erin Priess. You may know me. We did quite a bit of promoting for these webinars, so they've been great. I own Hockley and Ottawa Valley Mobile Vet Services, and I'm also the co-lead for the Ontario Animal Health Network Poultry. Usually with, I'm kind of Dr. Lucy Rosca's counterpart, and she couldn't join us this evening, unfortunately. We do some in-person appointments covering Dufferin, Wellington, Waterloo, and Ottawa, Kingston as well. And we also do some telemedicine. So we end up covering quite a broad range of area, just for kind of context. I came on tonight to kind of chat about my experience with AI from a small clinic perspective. It's just myself and one other vet, colleague of mine. So just wanted to chat about kind of what we saw through AI, not that it's over by any means, but just wanting to share experience as well as, you know, some of the issues and questions that came up. So I first wanted to say that this has been, you know, in a really crappy situation. It's been good to have a lot of support and collaboration between groups. So it's been a really coordinated effort with all of the groups, really, with OMAFRA, CFIA, ON, PIC, industry, and then the lab as well at Animal Health Lab at Guelph. There's been a lot of kind of behind the scenes work that started really early on, actually, kind of when we were starting to see cases in the States. There's been a lot of planning and coming together on that. So I wanted to say a big thank you to everybody who's, you know, contributing your time. I think it's really evident with these webinars. Everybody's, you know, really pulled together and been supportive, and it's been a really good resource for our small flock people. Animal Health Lab has been really super at U of G. So they've been testing all of the suspect cases, obviously, with swabs, and they also test all of our postmortems as well for AI before the postmortem is done, no matter what the suspect cause of death is. So that's been good. You know, I think it kind of is reassuring that we're not, you know, hopefully missing any cases that way. And they're a really great resource for vets. So if we have suspect cases or history that we want to chat about, or any, you know, photos to share, they're really great. We kind of go back and forth. So a lot of collaboration that way. And then a really big thank you to our small flock owners, you know, for trying to stay informed and really do their part. We've had a lot of very receptive small flock folks, so that's been really super and reassuring. In terms of a response from our clinic, pretty early on, I started, you know, researching and trying to keep up to date on the cases. So, gosh, I think it was maybe February. Al can reaffirm this because we started pretty early on, but I started researching and really tracking the USDA APHIS cases, as well as the ones from out east. If you, you know, are on social media, I was a little relentless in the early days. So, you know, we were trying to inform people and really using social media to help, you know, track those cases and trying to get, you know, people's guards up early on. And then we also do quite a bit of fielding questions from not only clients, but the public as well. So, you know, our door is always open, so to speak. And we get a lot of calls and emails. You know, it ranges from kind of general questions about AI to, you know, those high mortality events, I would say. So we you know, kind of run the gamut that way. And I guess the biggest thing is that we really modified our protocols as a business and in our own homes. So, you know, we've always been pretty careful about, you know, not wanting to spread disease between flocks. And we, you know, have biosecurity protocols in place there in terms of when we're moving from, you know, one premise to another and not wanting to spread things. And certainly, you know, if we had a suspect ILT case, you know, we have things we do, you know, after that call. But we really beefed things up with AI and, you know, started doing additional things like trying to wear boot covers, you know, spraying the car tires. You know, a lot of cases we're only seeing one flock in a day. And certainly if we had a suspect case, you know, we wouldn't be seeing anything else for several days. So it does take quite a bit of coordination on our parts and effort that way, and time and money, you know, to do that. And then also, I shouldn't say we, my husband isn't a bird person, but I have a number of birds that I have the number where you don't quite know how many you have. So I'm a bird person, and you know, obviously wanting to keep my birds safe after I'm on calls, and also we live in a forest, so you know, really trying to keep them safe. So had to modify some protocols here. So I'm right there with you, you know, kind of in revising how things were done at our home. So I wanted to kind of share some of the key issues that I saw with AI. The biggest thing I would say is that we saw a real uptick in behavioral issues. So we always see some degree of, you know, these kind of stereotypical behaviors like feather picking or egg eating, you know, usually in the winter when the birds are a little bit more bored. And I would say this year it was unfortunate because it was, you know, winter, and then it tracked right into a lot of folks keeping their birds, you know, cooped up, so to speak, in a run or even in a coop for a while. Right after winter. So we did see an increase in that. Kind of the flip side is we did see a lot of great enrichment ideas. So people were using a lot of food puzzles and foraging toys and that kind of thing. So that was really great to see. But yeah, unfortunately, there were a lot of behavioral issues. The other group that we saw that had you know, some real problems with AI are the waterfowl, of course. So if you have waterfowl, especially, you know, some breeds of duck, they are messy and they really like to have a lot of access to water. And, you know, in the small flock community, a lot of us have, you know, different species that are housed together, which obviously isn't recommended, but it does make things even more complicated because, you know, a lot of these waterfowl had a bigger pond, but then, you know, with AI, a lot of folks are trying to restrict their access to these bigger ponds and wild birds. So therefore they're like, okay, do I now put a pond in my run? You know, what if my chickens are also in that run? It really creates a tricky situation. And that kind of leads into my last point, which is that, you know, I'm sure a lot of us would love to build, you know, the coop of our dreams. But, you know, a lot of us are kind of working with what we have, and we tend to acquire birds, you know, over time we acquire more, and sometimes before we have a coop for them. So, you know, it's kind of tricky. It kind of runs the gamut. Like Meaghan was saying, there are some bank barns. You know, there's some, oh, the bird was sick, so I kept it inside. Like there's a lot of you know, those situations. And, you know, some, like I say, birds housed together. So it does make for some tricky logistical situations. You know, I don't think any of this is super new. You know, we kind of knew that the small flock community really exploded in the last, you know, few years especially. And I think that there are, you know, there are a lot of great resources out there for small flock owners, but it's also lacking in terms of things like vet care. And folks didn't necessarily know where to find information, reliable information. So I hope that these seminars and, you know, AI, kind of the silver lining is that hopefully it's given folks a sense of where to find reliable information and continuing education. And I'm actually working with Owen to do a series of podcasts and webinars on husbandry and diseases. So that'll be a really great thing to kind of watch out for coming down the pipe. Some scary moments for sure for me during AI. So, I mean, when it first started, you know, I've been worried about my own flock. So I'm right there with all the small flock people with that. I wouldn't say panic, but definitely wanted to do everything I could to prevent, you know, disease within my flock. And then, you know, worrying about spreading anything between flocks. So obviously, you know, like I said, we're quite careful, but it is something that, you know, keeps you up at 3 a.m. for sure. And then, you know, when they had the first human diagnosis in the US, that was worrisome as well. I think it was someone who worked directly with chickens on a daily basis, but still quite worrisome. And then when it jumped, you know, to foxes and skunks and some of the more scavenger species, that was also quite a scary moment, because obviously we also see a lot of livestock guardian dogs, you know, a lot of us that keep small flocks, you know, good or bad, may have some dogs out there or some barn cats. So that's always, you know, worrisome as well. By far and away, the biggest question we get is, when will it be over? When can I let my birds out? And this, you know, kind of started early on. And, you know, I really don't, I understand it completely. You know, it's been, like I said, for many of the reasons I listed, it's been a super frustrating time for people. And, you know, there's, like I said, increase in behavioral issues. We've had some logistical issues with coops. You know, it's kind of like COVID. It's human nature to kind of want to plan and understand when we're going to be kind of back to normal. And, you know, I wish I could answer that and had a crystal ball. I'm glad that we haven't had any, you know, cases in the last little bit, knock on wood, but, you know, I think it's important to be vigilant. And, you know, I kind of worry that this, you know, might not, we're going to continue to see it a little bit. And, you know, like Brian was saying, in the fall, with the migration, it'll be something to watch. And I think disease vigilance in general is important. So hopefully it's kind of raised some awareness about, you know, disease spread kind of thing. Just a little slide to go over the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'll start with bad and we can finish on a good note. So, you know, as a small clinic, we definitely, unfortunately, saw some misinformation and myths being spread, which is, you know, there's misinformation out there, and some people are great and receptive, but it's always really hard when, you know, people aren't, you know, receptive to hearing, you know, some of the facts, or they become hostile. That was really hard for us. So, you know, we were just kind of trying to share information and, you know, perspectives. And so it's always really tricky because we don't have any kind of hidden agenda, but some folks seem to be fairly hostile about it. Obviously, you know, there's always going to be some people who aren't following best practices and kind of find ways to skirt the system. So that's a little bit tricky and risky for sure. And the biggest thing was, you know, the heartbreak that we saw when there was a positive case. You know, not only, you know, we had clients who purchased birds from infected sites, all kinds of things. So, you know, there's a lot of heartbreak and worry before they were diagnosed, sorry. But yeah, there's a lot of heartbreak, and, you know, it's definitely been difficult from that perspective. And, you know, from the good, I think that the chicken world can be a very small place, and it was nice to see everybody kind of come together and be supportive of one another, and kind of feel like it was a you know, safe learning space for everybody. And I think that these webinars are a great demonstration of that. And there are a lot of great resources out there that I think folks learned about and may not have known about before this. So that's allowed for, you know, some great learning about AI and also about best practices and husbandry, including biosecurity. Hopefully it's, you know, kind of helped folks modify their practices at home to make everything a bit more of a safe space, you know, with other diseases as well. And there's a lot of really super responsible owners and breeders out there. So, you know, it's always great to get a reminder of that. Like I say, the silver lining in all of this for sure. So in summary, yeah, we definitely had some, you know, some negative moments, but I would say, you know, there was a lot of positive moments within it as well. And it, you know, I think we knew about some of the weaknesses in the small flock community, but it really, you know, helped us learn about those and kind of set a plan to be able to, you know, create more education and move forward and be aware of some of the resources that are out there for us, and help us kind of modify our practices at home. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everybody. You know, everybody's put such great work into you know, working together, and these webinars as well. And my final note would be, yeah, just continue to keep an eye on this situation and all disease situations, and just be informed and, you know, continue to watch things. So, and that's our email address there. If anybody has any questions or concerns, we are available.
Thanks very much, Erin. We covered some pretty good ground. So we're at that time where we're able to get to some questions, and I see we've got a few lined up here. So if other folks want to hop on. Okay, so the first question. So this individual has been very vigilant about swapping out their boots when accessing the coop and all this sort of stuff, but they had a breach, so the door was open and some birds kind of escaped. They feel like they're in a high-risk property because there is water nearby. Is there a definitive number of days for incubation period from contact to signs being exhibited, just so they can kind of stop worrying that there might have been some kind of disease issue? It's like you went to your aunt's party and you knew you shouldn't have, and you're like, am I gonna get COVID or not? Same kind of idea.
In the market of 2 to 14 days. Someone can correct me if that's, it's pretty quick.
Yeah. With chickens and turkeys, we've seen it happen. Like, we know there's a problem right away. With waterfowl, it seems to take longer. We've seen with the commercial waterfowl anyways. But yeah, if your chickens are something's gonna go wrong, it's gonna go wrong pretty fast.
So just a question for Brian. Are there any projects where you can start stacking the activities of swabbing songbirds during migration while they're doing banding?
So I don't know if there's plans for songbird testing when they're doing banding. I know there's a number of plans for waterfowl testing as they're doing banding, and some of that is going on in the north right now. And I know that both Environment and Climate Change Canada and the Ministry of Natural Resources has plans for testing waterfowl throughout their banding throughout the summer and into the fall as well. But I'm unsure if there is any plans for songbirds at this point.
Well, and I think some of the groups that are dealing with songbirds, especially in some of the urban areas where we've got lots of high-rise strikes, are very aware of that. I think that's where we see a lot of songbirds, right, Brian? Literally, they're collecting birds every morning that are striking buildings, and if there's any concerns, they can always be swabbed also.
Yeah, so we may look into that in the next little while as to whether or not we test some of those birds that are unfortunately hitting windows and buildings. So there may be plans coming forward for that.
But I guess once again, though, if you have a bird feeder and you suddenly find a bunch of dead birds at the bottom of that, that's prime time to call Brian.
Yes.
So here's a question around outdoor parrots. So they're secured, but they have outdoor flights. So they want to open the flights during the summer, but feeling a little hesitant for obvious reasons. So what kind of risks might they be facing as far as those birds coming into contact with wild birds, especially if they have a forest or other sort of wild bird attractants nearby?
So I think with the outdoor flights, it is the highest risk is going to be if the birds are exposed to anything that like fecal material from the wild birds. So you really are going to have to make sure that you're monitoring what your pet birds are exposed to when they are outside, but also making sure that they're not into anything that like pecking at anything that wild birds could have contaminated while the birds were, even if the birds weren't outside, some of the equipment or anything that they have within the flight, I would be concerned to make sure that that is clean before they put their birds out so that they're not exposing their pet birds to anything that has been contaminated, even if they're not out there.
Yeah. I think one of the things we had talked about in the past was, do you have a solid roof over the aviary or the flight pen that would help with prevention of anything coming through from above, especially if they're close to waterfowl. The waterfowl issue is, I think, still our critical area. And if you're free flying your birds, please don't. At this point, I've had a number of some pet owners just wringing their hands over some of their counterparts that are free flying their birds, thinking it's a natural thing to do. And as Erin and I've talked about this, it's your choice, right? Like if you want to do that, but if anything happens, it's also then on you.
Okay, prevention is key. So we just have someone who's interested in sort of the availability of poultry veterinary care, medical care for their birds, and how it seems a little difficult to find services.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So yeah, it's tricky for sure, and I really feel for the small flock owners. You need a second level of certification from our board to be able to practice with chickens. So those folks who do it probably have a companion animal license and a food animal one. So it is another level. And birds are like kind of mini dinosaurs, and that's just the truth of it, is they're very different from dogs and cats. And so I don't blame those folks for not, getting into that territory. There's a vet shortage across the province and, North America in general. So I think, unfortunately, a lot of the small animal people are swamped already, and, adding another level of education is tricky. So, it's kind of a complicated time, unfortunately, which is why we end up doing a lot of telemed.
Can I add to that? I know at the lab, we often refer people to talk to the College of Veterinarians of Ontario. So when we renew our veterinary license every year, we check off boxes as to what species we work with, and some clinics will, so clinics that work with pet birds may also be willing to work with chickens. So they might have a list at the CVO, so that if you call there, they might be able to help you, especially if you're in areas that you really don't know the availability of any avian vets.
Yeah, Owen has a list as well. It's sometimes not quite, like, it's hard to keep everything updated, and I think some of the small animal clinics are a little swamped, so they're not seeing as many birds. But yeah, CBO or Owen, I think both have lists.
Just a thank you from Connie. Thanks for your kind words, just that you've been enjoying the weekly updates. We really appreciate that. So a question from Irene. We've been removing old straw bales from our covered solid run, and mice scatter everywhere. So the birds have been catching and eating them. Is there a concern with that? What might they be able to do a little differently to kind of avoid that?
I guess this comes right back down to just a good rodent control program, right? And cats aren't necessarily a good rodent control program. So you might be looking at things like traps or bait. Are they a cause for spread of disease? They can be. Are they a good cause of spread of influenza? I don't think we've really seen that. I don't know if Emily or Brian have seen otherwise, but I haven't seen that. But yeah, if you're running into challenges with mice, it's going to be one of those things where you'll have to look at your rodent control program. We have information on the OMAFRA site about rodent control and some of the things you can do to help with that. If they are a biosecurity risk, and I'm also concerned too, because rodents are a great way of, they are the #1 cause of house fires and barn fires in rural areas, because they chew on electrical wire. So not only from a disease standpoint, I just want to make sure you're not burning your place down.
Okay, and question for Brian, have there been any barn swallows been affected?
Nope, so we haven't had any barn swallows or any songbirds in general that have been tested positive so far.
Okay,
We haven't seen any in Ontario. Have we seen it in other provinces or jurisdictions?
I haven't heard of any in North America yet. In Europe, they definitely have detected in certain songbirds and pigeons, but I don't know in North America. I haven't heard of specific songbirds aside from blue jays out east, but they're in the corvid family.
We'll just give a last call for any questions. not seen any, so you guys have done a really good job answering all the inquiring minds. So yeah, I guess we're done. I just want to say thanks again to everybody, folks tuning in from their cars and taking time out of their Tuesday evenings to provide excellent information and updates. This recording is going to be available tomorrow. Any last words, Al?
Just because we're done with our tonight webinars and it's been lifted, it doesn't mean the disease is gone, right? Like, so you're stay vigilant, the birds safe. Stay tuned to CFI. Like the CFI website has got the OMAFRA. Actually, you can go to the PIC website and use that as a funnel to get to the PIC website. Keep track of all the latest and greatest information. As zones get lifted, that'll be posted on the CFI website. If we get the C&D done on them, and hopefully we never have to talk to you guys again.
That's great. Thanks very much. Take care. Do your part. We'll see y'all soon.
Take care, everybody.